This is going to be a hell of an undertaking, but you saw the title for this video, you know what to expect from this, and I know you're all waiting to disagree with me in the comments about it. So, let's accumulate all of the knowledge I've built up over the last 30 plus years of playing JRPGs, and let's poke the bear by making a tier list of JRPG franchises. This is going to be a long video, so I suggest getting a cup of tea and getting comfortable. So, some ground rules before we get started, because let's be real, the definition of a JRPG is murky at best. In this video, I'm going to be discussing what I believe to be a traditional JRPG, turn-based or close to it, menu-focused combat in a carefully authored narrative rather than built around player-driven choice like Western RPGs are known for, built on the design philosophy of classic Japanese role-playing games like the original Dragon Quest. And by franchise, what I'm referring to is a series with at least 3 or more entries in it. Now, there's every chance I may have missed at least one because I'm only human, and I won't even try to claim that I've played every game in every franchise because that would be literally insane. But I'm going to use a combination of my own experience and those of my community, which I encourage you to join in with by jumping into my Discord link to the description box and continue the discussion there, as well as the cultural impact that these franchises may have had. And now for some mentions of games I have not included in this list. First up, Kingdom Hearts. I find it really strange that so many people, both fans and otherwise, unequivocally call Kingdom Hearts a JRPG when really it plays nothing like one. I mean, the first game is closer to a platformer than a traditional JRPG, so after discussing it with my community, I've chosen not to include it here. Nier, the Mana games, and Rune Factory come under this as well. We can always make a tier list of action RPGs if this video does well, so like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want more like this. Pokemon is another game I won't be talking about here. This one is actually more arguable. I think this does qualify as a JRPG, but a lot of people that I've spoken to don't, so I figure it's easier to just leave it off the list. You're welcome to argue this one in the comments, because I would have put it on here. I'm just going with a majority vote on this one. I've also left off any tactical RPG franchises like Fire Emblem and Disgaea for the same reason as Kingdom Hearts. Tactical RPGs can get their own video too. If anything, I'm certain that people will argue about what constitutes a JRPG and what doesn't in the comments, but that does prove quite how fluid that term actually is, and hey, it's free engagement for me. So, with that, let's get on with it and start with the most well-known JRPG franchise on the list, Final Fantasy. Nowadays, a lot of people dismiss Final Fantasy and in some areas discuss whether Final Fantasy even is a JRPG anymore, given that its most popular modern title is an MMORPG, and we haven't actually seen a traditional menu-based JRPG for quite some time. But we have to think of the bigger picture here, because while Final Fantasy has taken a fair few swings in different directions over the years, they have actually been doing that the entire time, and doing that has spawned other entries in this very video, so we have to respect that, as well as the fact that without Final Fantasy, there's a solid chance a large portion of the people watching this video would never have looked at anything else on this video. A franchise like Final Fantasy could never have spin-off titles built entirely off of fan service like Dissidia, Theatrhythm, or the mobile titles if the IP itself wasn't strong enough to carry it. And yet here we are, so to try and downplay the sheer strength of the franchise as opposed to individual titles would be foolhardy. There is a strong reason why, even though people have felt burned by some of the newer entries in the Final Fantasy series, people still get chills whenever a new one is announced. The high points of the Final Fantasy franchise are completely unforgettable, and one of the best things about Final Fantasy is that everybody has a different favourite. Mine, for example, are 5 and 9, but 6, 7, and 10 are absolute pinnacles of the genre in their own right. And that's not forgetting that the original Final Fantasy set a tone for everything that came after it. People can argue all they want, but I think it would be a mistake to put Final Fantasy in anything other than S tier, don't you? The same goes for Dragon Quest if you ask me. Dragon Quest may not have the popularity in the West it has in Japan, but that popularity is growing exponentially in the West, and rightfully so. The more recent re-releases of the Erdrick trilogy in the HD2D remakes, and soon DQ7 reimagined, highlight quite why Dragon Quest is so beloved and so long-lasting. As opposed to Final Fantasy, which has had a tendency to swing big in directions outside of the traditional JRPG genre, even in its numbered titles, Dragon Quest has largely stuck to its guns through thick and thin, and carried largely the same systems from the original Dragon Quest all the way up to 11, and hopefully 12 if it ever sees the light of day. Very much like Final Fantasy, everyone has a different favourite, which to me is a hallmark of a really strong franchise. Most commonly you'll hear about Dragon Quest 8 or 11, which are both phenomenal by the way, but my personal favourites are 5 for its characters and unique point of view compared to the others, and Monsters, which is a spin-off and what I actually grew up with instead of Pokemon. 9 and 10 are the closest thing that Dragon Quest has to straying off the beaten path, and they're both very successful spins on the tried and tested formula, even if we never got to see Dragon Quest 10 in the West sadly. But fact to facts, Dragon Quest is the forefather of the JRPG genre, and the fact that it still stands so tall by itself is nothing short of extraordinary. There are plenty of franchises with big hitters on this list that you never hear from now, and yet Dragon Quest is still up there with the best of them. This is S tier for sure. Let's move away from Square Enix for a moment and turn back the hands of time with something a bit nostalgic and talk about Breath of Fire, Capcom's darling RPG franchise from the 90s. Now, we haven't seen a Breath of Fire game in the West since 2002's Dragon Quarter, and even Japan only saw Breath of Fire 6 as a free-to-play mobile title in 2016. The fans have been clamoring for a long time, but when you look back at the games historically, they never exactly reinvented the wheel. Full disclosure, I've only actually played the first 2 Breath of Fire games on the Game Boy Advance, and I'm well aware of how much the fandom loves Breath of Fire 4 in particular. But regardless of how much people love 4, the rest of the franchise doesn't fare nearly as well. From personal experience, the first 2 games are fine, they're certainly not bad, good enough that I finished them, but I would put them at the lower end on personal experience, and from talking to others, all I ever hear about is love for Breath of Fire 4 and hate for Breath of Fire 5. I never hear about the third game at all, so I think it's fair to put Breath of Fire on the lower end of the scale in C tier, which doesn't mean it's bad, please don't get it twisted. Something's got to go in the lower tier, so I'm splitting hairs across the board in this video. But one strong game a franchise does not make. I would love to see a new entry in the franchise to lift this one up though. Let's now go to another major JRPG juggernaut with Persona. I'm not going to be contrarian here, and I'm going to tell you straight up I'm going to put it in S tier, because I think its influence is massively felt across not just the JRPG landscape, but the gaming landscape at large, and so I have a deep respect for Persona, and I love certain aspects of it. The music is absolutely captivating, I'm going to the concert for it later this year, can't wait. I think the UI is magnificent, and stylistically the influences are worldwide for good reason. Though I have to confess something that a lot of people will almost certainly come for me for. I find it really difficult to actually play Persona for the same reason everyone else loves it. I've played and finished Persona 3, 4 and 5 and played a little bit of the first game back on a retro handheld, 4 being the one I enjoyed the most, but I find the slice of life aspects, the social links, all of that really difficult to digest. The endless dialogue, the visual novel of it all of that stuff as such. But that just reinforces the fact that all of this is subjective, and despite the fact that I don't love Persona in the same way a lot of people do, I can still more than easily respect it enough to feel its power in pop culture, so there's no way it doesn't go in S tier. But what about Persona's mother franchise, Shin Megami Tensei? So this is weird, because I actually vastly prefer SMT to Persona for its challenge, its focus on gameplay, and I kind of prefer its ideologies and theming as well, focusing on more extreme topics than the more modern Persona games which focus on individual relationships, at least before it decides to go the teenagers versus God route anyway. And yet, I would still rank SMT below Persona. SMT came much earlier than Persona, obviously, and established a lot of its familiar iconography like the Jack Frost way back, but I would argue that a vast majority of people didn't even know what SMT was until Persona started to arrive on the scene, certainly Persona 5. SMT is renowned for its challenge, but it's also quite unapproachable by a lot of people for that reason, so while I might love it for that reason, does it have the same cultural impact as Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or even its own spin-off, Persona? I'd say no, but I definitely think it still has a ton of incredible games and some cultural impact, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Let's go back to Square Enix for a bit and talk about one of the franchises that comes off from Final Fantasy, which is the Saga series. Saga took the ideologies of Final Fantasy II and ran with them, starting with Final Fantasy Legend on the Game Boy, and has continued to be one of the longest running and most divisive entries on this list. People who like Saga love Saga, and there are a couple of the games of the franchise that I've played myself, like Saga Frontier 2 and the recent Romancing Saga 2 remake, that I enjoyed, but there are twice as many, more even, that I really didn't get on with. Saga Emerald Beyond, Unlimited Saga, Scarlet Graces, I just bounced off all of them, and a lot of people felt the same way. These games are not easy to get into. And I'll be honest with you, even the high points of the franchise don't come close to the high points of some of the other franchises in this list, so I have to put this pretty low down. Saga has its fans, don't get me wrong, and their feelings are absolutely valid, but they're largely unapproachable and made for a very specific niche audience, so I'm putting this in C tier. I'm going to say the same thing here as I did with Breath of Fire though. C tier doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. These franchises have been long lasting for a reason. This is just a personal list based on my own experiences and the cultural impact that I feel these franchises have had in the greater scheme. Bravely Default is such an interesting franchise because I both absolutely love it and simultaneously feel really ambivalent towards it. It's a really strange feeling. And I blame the HD remaster of the first game for at least part of this. I loved the 3DS version of the first game. Literally one of my favourite games ever at the time. And then when I played it again on Switch 2 for the HD remaster, I really felt like I was forcing myself through it to the end. It's weird because the game hasn't changed since then, and yet I reacted to it very differently the second time around. Honestly, this is why I get nervous when any of my favourite games get announced for remakes or remasters. Sometimes I feel like some of these games are better left in my memories, if that makes sense. I still fear for that in the eventuality of a Final Fantasy IX or Vagrant Story remake. Are any of you with me on that? Also, seeing Ring a Bell on a second playthrough really highlights quite how problematic that character was. I really liked him once upon a time, but oof, no. And then there's Bravely Second and Bravely Default 2, which are both good, but I don't think that the follow-up games really set many people on fire. Even though I feel the way I do about the first game, or its remaster specifically, I do still want to see a lot more from it though. It's got such interesting mechanics that lead on from the likes of Final Fantasy V, and the music is spectacular. I still get shivers from Revo's tracks in the first game, but is that enough to pull it up from C tier? Personal bias makes me want to put it at least in B tier, because I do think it's better than what's in the C tier already, so I think I'll do that, but if you think it should be different, then you feel free and let me know. Octopath Traveler, on the other hand, I think takes pretty much everything Bravely Default started and improves on it significantly. Team Asano absolutely hammered in their own visual style with the HD 2D, and it just works so well here. The music is some of the most intelligent I've ever heard in any game, period, and adapting the Brave and Default commands into the systems in Octopath also works brilliantly. There's only 3, technically 4 games in the Octopath franchise if you include Champions of the Continent, all of which were made in the last decade, but they all stand well upright by themselves, can be played in any order, and have a huge impact on the gaming space, certainly in its visual style. So many indie RPGs are inspired by this look and feel, and it's brilliant. I actually think Octopath Zero, despite being an adaptation of a mobile title, is my favourite one, which is why I made so many videos on it when it came out. The main reason I'm putting Octopath Traveler in A tier rather than S tier is because it just doesn't have the history the other franchises that are in S tier have, yet. But every single game they've released within this franchise has been a major hit, and rightfully so, they're just brilliant. Okay, let's move off from Square Enix again, they're getting too much attention anyway, and talk about another hugely popular franchise, one that I've been diving into more recently and discovering a lot of pleasant things about, which is Trails. Now I'm going to leave the disclaimer that I'm still playing through Trails in the Sky first chapter and have only played bits of some of the others because it's so big and scary, but there's a serious temptation for me to put this in S tier because there's just no way a franchise, one that's as niche as this, can have such a fervent fan base that truly loves every ounce of what it does without being brilliant at it. If world building and long form storytelling is your thing, literally none of the other franchises on this list even compares to the Trails franchise. Even I, as a newcomer, can appreciate quite how much detail, love and attention goes into this world. It's staggering how well Trails weaves its stories together and results in entire games worth of payoff for those who pay attention, like Reverie and Through the Horizon. I mean, heck, what other franchise can you think of where a game is made up of the protagonists of 4 other games in the same series? The only thing that's holding me back from putting Trails in S tier and therefore popping it in A tier is how unapproachable it is to a casual audience. I made an entire video explaining why Trails is so challenging to get into, and that is something that I consider noteworthy. But realistically, I don't think that any other franchise, even outside of JRPGs, caters to its fan base as well as Trails does, you know? Nah, screw it, I'm going to put it in S tier. This one's for the fans. You guys put this entry as high as it is. I just hope I can catch up to be there with you soon. The Tales franchise, which I have to really over-enunciate to not get it confused with Trails, Trails, I think is a very, very mixed bag. There are Tales games I absolutely love, like Vesperia and Symphonia. Ones I feel pretty ambivalent towards, like Zestiria and Zillia, and ones that I absolutely loathe, like, sadly, Arise, which I still claim has the worst written protagonists across this entire list. The Tales games are very, very good at sticking within their own niche, which is being a hybrid of traditional and action RPG, but I don't think that anyone would question this as being a JRPG, which is impressive in its own right, and the high points of the franchise are really very high. Certainly for the time of their release, Kratos in Symphonia was a revelation in all the right and the wrong ways. It was so camp. But sometimes I can't help but feel like the Tales games phone it in, and those occasions happen a little more often than I'd like, so I'm hesitant to put them high up on the list. But I'd say it's definitely higher up than low tier because the high points are really strong, so I think this lands safely in B tier. I spoke about the Shadow Hearts franchise on a recent video about horror JRPGs and how we'd love to see them return, because they're practically non-existent these days. But the Shadow Hearts games are very fondly remembered by audiences for a damn good reason. They're unique, the characters are well loved, and they broke a lot of ground for gameplay mechanics that future games in the genre would utilise. Even if you discounted Kudelka, which plays extremely differently from the other games in the series, Shadow Hearts is a cult classic, and it's a shame that we've never seen anything like it since. But I still wouldn't put this super high on the list because it has so few games in it, and the third game wasn't received nearly as well as the first two. It's got a little bit of a Breath of Fiery vibe to it in that way, but I personally think the high points of this series hit higher than those of Breath of Fire, though that could come to my lack of experience with Breath of Fire, so forgive me for that, but I'm going to put this in B tier. Can we move into Nintendo for a while? Because I think that Nintendo has actually brought us some killer JRPGs over the years, and people don't talk about it often enough. There's Fire Emblem, of course, but like I said, that's not a traditional JRPG. But we also have the Super Mario RPGs, which are themselves pretty varied, whether it be Mario and Luigi, Paper Mario, or the actual Super Mario RPG. I'm happy to lump all of those together if you are, but the quality of these is actually shockingly consistent when you look at them. Think about it. Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, Super Paper Mario, which admittedly isn't as traditional a JRPG as the other two, all great. Super Mario RPG, great. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Bowser's Inside Story, Partners in Time, all great. Sure, there have been a few wayward ships among them, like Sticker, Star and Brother Ship, but even they aren't that bad, and they all harness the personality of the Super Mario franchise pretty damn well in a JRPG scenario. They're genuinely funny a lot of the time and don't take themselves too seriously at all, which is really quite refreshing in this genre, certainly when you compare it to the other ones in this list. So I think these are collectively at least B tier, if not A tier, right? We're looking for consistency across these franchises, and I'll say it, Super Mario's got it, so I genuinely think this can go in A tier, actually. How can we talk about Nintendo JRPGs and not talk about Golden Sun? Camelot absolutely knocked it out of the park with the first two games. One seamless story, two different parties, brilliant gameplay. The visuals back in the days of the GBA were breathtaking. The music was great. There is a reason that people have been asking for a new Golden Sun for decades. Well, provided we forget about Dark Dawn, which was significantly less good. And ended on a cliffhanger, I might add, which we never got a resolution for. I should put this in C tier out of spite for that alone. But the first two games are so good that I just can't bring myself to do that. I actually really applaud the gameplay of Golden Sun as well. The puzzle solving aspects of Golden Sun were brilliantly done. The dungeons kind of felt like Zelda dungeons more than anything, or certainly more than Final Fantasy ones. They were really fun. They were interactive. There was stuff to do in the game beyond walking from point A to B with random fights along the way. Personal bias, I'd totally put this in A tier. I love the first two games that much, but I'm going to be sensible because it is unfinished, and 1/3 of the games that made up for Golden Sun are not good. So I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm going to put it in B tier. So I'm going to be putting all of the Xeno games together because while Xeno Saga, Xenogears, and Xenoblade are all separate, they do all fall under the same creative lineage made by the same creators. They don't have the same stories, but neither do Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, so if they can be one entry, then so can the Xeno games. Cosmos is in Xenoblade 2 too, don't forget. And it's just as well too, because when you put them all together, the Xeno library is actually very impressive, which makes me really sad at how few of the games prior to Xenoblade actually came out in the UK. I have played Xenosaga 2 and 3, which I consider to be the weak point of the franchise, but they're still really good. And I still don't know how I played them either, looking back at it, because I'm pretty sure that they didn't come out in the UK, but I definitely remember buying them from a store in the UK when I was young. But that's beside the point. I'm also currently playing Xenosaga by way of a retro handheld, and they all have such a strong point of view that it's magnificent. The Xeno games are very much beloved by a large audience, certainly since Xenoblade saw such mainstream success, and even though I can't stand the fan service in Xenosaga and Xenoblade 2, it seriously bothers me. I still can't say I dislike the games, because they're brilliant, and the way that Xenoblade 3 plays out is just beautiful and rewarding to people who've played everything that came before it. Like I said, I think the only weak spot of the franchise is Xenosaga, and that's only because I'm more akin to less cutscene, more game. I still think Xenosaga's really good, and it hits some really interesting topics, and it feels a little bit out of place, I suppose, amongst the other games now, but it's still a great game. So I think by merit of, like, consistency, the Monolith soft games just sit in S tier, right? Suikoden is a really tough game to play, or Suikoden, however you pronounce that correctly. From a personal standpoint, I've only played the first 2 games thanks to the HD remasters, as well as Suikoden Tear Christ on the DS, which is a really weird place to get an entry into the franchise. And of those, the only one I really liked was Suikoden 2, but I really like Suikoden 2. I think Luca Blight is one of the best villains put in a game, period, and he's not even the final villain. However incredible Suikoden 2 is, though, literally up there with the very best, we're looking at the entire franchise. And from speaking to others, the games after Suikoden 2, including the spin-offs, the one I played was really weird, don't come anywhere near close to that high. And in all fairness, I'm in JRPG circles a lot, and I never hear anything about any other Suikoden game than 2. So I think it has to knock it down at least a mark or 2. I think it's noteworthy in terms of cultural impact that Suikoden got a spiritual successor in Eiyuden Chronicle, which isn't nearly as good, unfortunately. So that influence is definitely there, and Suikoden really is that good, so it doesn't feel right to put it lower than A tier just because of Suikoden 2. I've said that, like, consistency is important with a lot of the other games, including Breath of Fire, where people love Breath of Fire 4 that much. But I don't think that Breath of Fire 4 comes even close to Suikoden 2. It can't do. Like, I've not played Breath of Fire 4, but I'll be really impressed if it really is that good. Because that's the one franchise I'm looking at in this list and going, I think I'm going to get Red to Phil for putting that low, but I'm only speaking from my own experiences. But Suikoden 2 it's that bitch, I'm sorry. The Luna franchise often makes me feel guilty because I have to remind myself that it even exists. Again, a lot of these games weren't released in Europe, which is really sad because very specific Luna games have major cult followings, and they are strong, like Silver Star Story Complete on PS1 in particular. However, a lot of Luna games have historically fallen very flat over the years, and a lot of the releases between the original Silver Star and the remastered collection from last year are just repeats of the same 2 games over and over again. My only experience with Luna is Luna Dragon Song, which was, as far as I'm aware, the first game in the franchise we got in the UK and came out on the Nintendo DS. And I've got to tell you, that game was not good. Having to choose between EXP or items after combat for a start, just no. I do actually own the remaster collection. I was sent a copy of it for my birthday last year, and I still to this day don't know who sent it, which is a little bit creepy. I'm hoping to have time to explore more of the Luna franchise later on, but as it stands, due to the inconsistency of the releases and the poor impression that I've personally had, this is going to have to go in C tier. Another franchise I do want to quickly touch on is Parasite Eve. I love Parasite Eve 1 and 2, but despite that, it's actually really easy for me to put this in C tier, because let's be real, of the 3 Parasite Eve games out there, only one of them even slightly resembles a JRPG. The other 2 just go off in completely different directions, and while I like Parasite Eve 2, it's just a Resident Evil clone, and the Third Birthday is just an outright bad game. Can we get a new Parasite Eve, preferably one that plays like the first one, please? Going back to Nintendo again now, the Mother games are a very noteworthy JRPG franchise. There's actually very little like it out there, except for the games that are directly inspired by it, which themselves are extremely influential. I'm looking at you, Undertale. And Mother does something that I have a great deal of respect for. Mother is weird, like really weird, and doesn't shy away from that weirdness. Of course, the most noteworthy example of a Mother game outside of Japan is Earthbound, or Mother 2, which is phenomenal even today. It's parodical and yet weirdly serious, a tone that's explored in a ton of indie titles to this day. Look at games like Omori, which take this to an extreme. Earthbound Beginnings, which is available on NSO, the re-release of the original Mother game it's alright, it's okay, but Mother 3 is amazing. Or so I hear. I've never played it, because to this day, it has still never been released outside of Japan, which is crazy. How this hasn't been translated and put on NSO or something, you'd have people swarming over this. But due to the sheer power of Earthbound and the heavy influence this franchise has had over the years and continues to have from this day onwards, I think this safely sits in A tier. And looking at it, Nintendo really does churn out some great JRPGs actually. And then finally, to close out our list, we have Star Ocean. Oh, Star Ocean. I love Star Ocean. It's weird. Because when Star Ocean's good, it is actually really good. But that's upsettingly rare when it comes to this franchise. My first Star Ocean game was 3, Till the End of Time, and I remember it fondly. But I don't think I could play through it now. It's super cheesy. The combat is okay, but the characters are really good, and I'm sure that other more patient people than me still really love it. The only Star Ocean game I genuinely really like, and I do love it, is 2. If you haven't played it, play the more recent remake, Second Story R. It's fantastic. I have a lot of high praise for SO2, but the other games, not so much. Star Ocean 4 and 5 are genuinely awful, and 6 is only okay at best. So I hate to close out our list by putting a franchise in C tier, but we're going to have to do it. The pillars are there. They're not all bad games, but those pillars are just not realized often enough. And 1, maybe 2 games out of more than 6 is not a particularly good ratio, and the ones that are good aren't exactly Suikoden 2 levels of earth-shattering. By the way, I know it's not on this list, but Wild Arms is a franchise I want to put down somewhere, but I genuinely haven't played a single entry in this franchise. It's one of very few gaming franchises out there that I have literally zero experience with. So it would feel wrong to put this down anywhere. So I'm going to leave it. All I know is apparently Wild Arms 3 in particular is amazing. So I hope I find the time to play it at some point. And then to close out, let me tell you a few of the games that I have purposefully not put on this list because I know a bunch of people will complain. I've decided against putting Monster Hunter Stories just yet because there's only 2 games in that franchise right now, even though they are technically Monster Hunter games. But once the 3rd game comes out, which looks awesome by the way, I'll be happy to do coverage on that by itself and then we can revisit them. They're actually really good by the way. Hyperdimension Neptunia is a franchise I know that has an audience, but I don't think I'm the right audience for it because, to be honest with you, I would probably just rank this badly, which would be unfair to it because I cannot stand the fan service in this game. If you want, I'll rank it lower than everything else in the bottom tier because I can't help but just think that these aren't very good games, but that could just be because I'm not the right audience for it. The Atelier games are another massive JRPG franchise I haven't covered in this video because simply I just don't know an awful lot about it and it's not a game that really speaks to me personally. It leans a lot more into the whole slice of life thing that I don't typically get on with, but I'd love to know where you'd put it on the list if you want to tell me. Honestly, it's so hard to nail down exactly what a traditional JRPG franchise even is that there's all sorts of games that probably could have gone on this list and didn't. So if there are any franchises I've missed out here, let me know what they are and I'll respond and I'll let you know why I omitted them or if I just forgot them. There's a lot of franchises already in this video. So yeah, there you have my ultimate tier list of JRPG franchises. I'll leave a link in the description box below if you want to try this for yourself, but let me know if you agree with them or don't, but at least be nice about it if you don't. This is all subjective after all. And if you've enjoyed today's video, your subscribe would be mighty appreciated. And of course, you can find me all over the place on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, wherever you like. And if you'd like to support the channel and join in with exclusive chats and even feature in the videos yourselves, you can sign up to my Patreon through the link in the description box below too. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. I'm going to go and play some more Trails now because I have a lot of catching up to do. So have a wonderful day and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, everyone.